Hey guys, this is another video, and the title of this video is How Much Does God Love Jesus? He loves Jesus this? No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, it's not a specific amount that God loves Jesus. This just has to do with the specific nature of love. Love, I don't know if any of you guys have ever been in love before, but when you guys are in love, you think about that person constantly. You see that person everywhere, even though it may not be the person. You're always looking for that person. Everything reminds you about that specific person that you love. So this is the same way with God the Father and Jesus Christ. Everything in this world, everything that God has made, He's made so that He might grope to find us. That's a verse in Acts where Paul is actually appealing to the people of a specific town, and he's telling them, "Look, guys, God has made everything so that you might find Him as your Creator, and that you might have a loving relationship with Him." And this is very interesting because the stuff that God teaches me, I'm not aware that He's taught anybody. So this is just one of the examples. This is that long-awaited series of of Jesus in nature, and this is specifically me and God. Like God has taught me this by myself as I've been witnessing to people, or as I've been living my Christian life. God has taught me certain spiritual truths, and I think that you guys will find this very edifying. So just remember that the title of this video is How Much Does God Love Jesus? So with the stuff that God is about to show you through me, it's going to be very interesting. And of course, uh, it's not apologetic in nature. In other words, this isn't stuff that you go and beat over an atheist's head. It's very interesting stuff, and certainly um, you could do that. But my goal here is to show you how much God loves Jesus. And in other words, like, I want you guys to imitate that same love. This isn't this information I don't want you guys to use in order to puff up your chest. In other words, it's not knowledge. I think, like, for me, this stuff is humbling, and it's really edifying because I see it as something loving. I don't see it as something that I can immediately go and share with the world and shut them off with their wrong beliefs. But I do want you guys. I don't want you guys to be unaware how much Jesus is in nature. Jesus is in absolutely everything. There's a verse in Colossians that says that all hidden wisdom and knowledge is found in Jesus Christ. And that's absolutely true. In my studies, in my academic studies specifically, like, God has revealed ridiculous amounts of Jesus. You know what I'm saying? Like, to the point where it's like, man, I see Jesus. I see Jesus more in nature than I did when I was being really studious reading the Bible. And of course, there's the same amount of Jesus. There's the same amount of Jesus in the Bible that there is in nature. But because I've never seen Jesus in nature quite like I have now, then it seems like there's so much Jesus in nature. Because we don't expect to find Him there. We don't expect to find Jesus in the things of science. Like, there's a wrong view that it's science versus religion. And that may be true, you know what I'm saying? Because every other religion is false. The only true thing is Jesus Christ and His sacrifice for us on the cross. So maybe science is against every other religion, but it's definitely not against Jesus Christ. So this is just one thing. It's one of many. Jesus' pattern. So Jesus' pattern is death, burial, and resurrection. This is God's pattern. Jesus Christ's pattern was a pattern of death, and then He was buried, and then He was resurrected. Um, and we can see this pattern in nature everywhere you look. And of course, I'm not going to make one long video based on everywhere that I've seen Jesus. I'm going to make it in parts. So this first part is going to be part one. And where does everything start? So this is just very interesting. I want you guys to, like, sit down and say, hey, where did everything start? And I think God will tell you. He'll teach you. Everything in this world starts with breath. And I think this is one of the most interesting things that I found, because I did a little thing where I was dancing a lot. Not a little thing, I love it. Dance is pretty cool. But there's one dance technique. It's called oh, sorry. All right, sorry, that was my dad. But yeah, there was this one thing, like, modern dance technique. It's separated into, I think, 6 categories, and the first category is breath. And this is very interesting because in the Bible, everything starts with God's breath. So God breathes into man. God gives man His spirit, and that's how we become a living soul or a living being. This is in Genesis. So I want you guys to understand that our life begins in the breath of God. Um, so it was really interesting because as I was studying this stuff in dance, I was like, oh snap! Like, because of course dance teachers tell me all the time, they're like, hey, everything begins with breath and how breath can bring life into your movement. And it didn't sound quite right, but then I noticed as I breathed into the movement, it gave the movement a different quality and a different nature than when I wouldn't focus on my breath. And really, my friend Brandon had actually talked to me about it too. Second Brandon Wingate. Brandon Wingate, he's a friend of mine. But he had told me that every religion it always deifies breath. In other words, it makes breath something spiritual or something godlike, and they don't know why. So like monks are always focused on the breath, and they're always like, and yogas, no, not yogas. They're called yogis, but yoga also, it has you really focused on your breath. Breathe in, breathe out, certain intervals. It has you controlling the breath, but they don't know why. Of course, Christianity does give you a reason why. Breath is our gift from God, and that's how we actually become alive. So I wanted you guys to know that even atheists, every time they breathe in and out, God is trying to reach them through Jesus Christ. Because even breath, the very thing that God gives us, the first thing that God gives us, which is the breath, it symbolizes Jesus Christ. So when I breathe, right, I'm breathing. Right now, it's breathing out. Breathing out represents death, right? When we breathe out, that's when we die. When Jesus breathed his last, that's when he died. He was breathing it. He breathed his spirit out. So that's death. When we breathe neither in or out, that represents the grave. So Jesus, when he didn't breathe in or out, that's when, of course, he was in the grave. For 3 days and 3 nights, he was in the grave, so he breathed neither in or out. And when Jesus breathed back in again, that represents resurrection. So breath out, death. Breathing neither in or out, or stillness, represents the grave. And then breathing back in, that represents resurrection. So even if a person is an atheist, or even if a person says, I'm not sure about what kind of God there is out there, you can always point them to their breath. There's something that they do every day on a daily basis. Every minute they're breathing in and out, and they don't realize that God is reaching out to them to help them find Jesus. Breathing in, breathing out, and not breathing in or out, that's death, burial, and resurrection. When we breathe out, that symbolizes our death. Neither in or out, that's the grave. And when we breathe back in, that's our resurrection. So that's just an interesting thing that God had shown me when some man told me that he was really spiritual. And I was like, oh snap, because I was trying to talk to him about Jesus, and he was like, yeah, I'm a spiritual person. And God took me to that. He was like, oh snap. Like, I asked God about that. I was like, what does that mean? How can you be spiritual and not have any specific thing that you believe in? But he took me to that because the word spirit in Hebrew, it's the Hebrew word ruach, and that's the breath, or the spirit, or the wind. And it's the same way with the other biblical language, which is Greek. The Greek language is pneuma. The word for spirit is pneuma, and that's also wind. So we have to understand that wind, it's a representation of God. And which God is it? I would have to say it's the God that both dies and is buried and is resurrected, because that's the spirit that we breathe. We breathe one of death, burial, and resurrection, because that's who Christ is. He's a God of death, burial, and resurrection, and that's what we have to understand as human beings. Is if we're looking for a God, then which God is it? Is it a God that follows what I see in nature, or is it a God that I've made up, that men have made up? And I think that the only God that qualifies is Jesus Christ, because he submitted himself to become a man and show you exactly who God is. And that's always that's what human beings have longed for. Like, who is God? Like, how does he look? What does he do? And that's exactly what Jesus did. He became a man to show us who God is. Because, of course, God is an infinite being. He's supernatural, and he's unseen. He's everywhere. But if he doesn't limit himself in order that we may understand him, then we would never reach out to find him. In other words, there'd be no way I'd be able to even fathom God without Jesus Christ. Because how would I know about death, burial, and resurrection without, of course, Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection? And that's something that it's like the veil was lifted. You know what I'm saying? Like when people say the scales fell from people's eyes or the veil was lifted, it's the same thing. There was a veil over the understanding of people before Jesus Christ came. And I think the veil is lifted in Jesus Christ, because every moment that a human being is alive, um, God remembers Jesus Christ in us because we breathe in and out. So it's a very interesting thing, because that's how much God loves Jesus, that he couldn't fathom creating anything outside of not only Jesus Christ, because we know that Jesus Christ, everything was created for him, through him, and by him. But also it was made in his image. It's pretty cool, like, because God made man in his image, and then God made creation also in Jesus' image. And this is just a simple foundational thing, and it's going to be really cool for you guys to actually start, when you breathe in and out, just be like, oh snap, this is another way that we can remember Jesus, is in our breath. And of course, God does the same thing with the Lord's communion, when we take in food, when we take in that bread, and when we take in that wine or grape juice, whatever your church serves. It's just another commemoration of Jesus Christ's death, burial, and resurrection. And little did we know that God had already created a foundation of life based on Jesus Christ, which was our breath. Thank you guys. Just think about it, pray about it. The next video is also going to be similar. I think the next video will probably be on food. These are foundational things, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm going to start very basically. It's going to be very basic at first, you know what I'm saying? Starting, hey, what do you guys need to live? And of course, people would say, hey, the first thing we need to live that we can't live without is air. So that's why I did air first, because if I can survive, I've been 3 days without food or water. So I know I can survive at least 3 days without food or water, but I don't know about air. I don't know how many days I can survive without air. 0 days. You know what I'm saying? So if I go one whole day without air, I'm dead. So we started with air. I think tomorrow or whenever I upload the next video, I'm going to start with either food or water. Probably both. They're very similar, but I'm gonna go from there. So next video is probably going to be on food or water. And you guys, if you watch this video, try to pray about it before you watch the next video. It doesn't matter, like, even though I may upload the video tomorrow about food or air, like, talk to God about it. Can you see Jesus in the food that you eat? Is there death, burial, and resurrection in the food that you eat? And it's going to start getting into science. You know, I'm going to go into DNA, and then I'm also going to go into very many things. Like, God has taught me so many things, like light, how we perceive the things in this world. He taught me about light. He taught me about colors. He taught me about chemical bonds. So there's gonna be a lot. Like, and even if you guys want to get into numbers, I can show you numbers also. But God has shown me a lot. Those are just things to look forward to. But tomorrow, food and water. So now that I've given you like a basic little understanding of God, you guys can now like go and try to look for Jesus in your life. You know what I'm saying? And it starts with breath. So thank you guys.